She had spent years feeling like she could never be enough. Her mother-in-law's words cut deeper than any knife, echoing in every corner of her heart. And tonight, at their anniversary dinner, surrounded by candlelight and quiet chatter, she braced herself for humiliation once again. But what happened next would leave the entire restaurant holding its breath and change everything she thought she knew about love. Hello, my friends. I am Olivia, and this is Olivia's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I remember the first time I met Eleanor, my husband's mother. She was polished to perfection. Pearls, silk scarves, a sharp smile that could slice through confidence like butter. The very first words she ever said to me were, "You're not really what he deserves, you know?" I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. But those words stayed, nesting in the back of my mind like a persistent shadow. Over the years, I tried to prove myself. I baked, I hosted, I smiled through her criticisms, I decorated our home just right, made the holidays sparkle, and yet Eleanor always had a way of making me feel small. Every compliment from her was calculated, every smile tinged with judgment. I started doubting myself, questioning whether my husband even noticed my efforts, or worse, if he agreed with her. Michael, my husband, was different. Warm, gentle, protective in ways no one saw. He never said much about his mother's sharp remarks, only holding my hand when I felt invisible, leaving little notes of encouragement in my laptop bag or on the bathroom mirror. He believed in me quietly, steadfastly, and sometimes that was enough to keep me going, most days. Tonight was our 5th wedding anniversary. Michael had made a reservation at La Belle Epoque, the restaurant we went to on our first date. Soft golden lights, the faint aroma of rosemary and roasted garlic in the air, servers gliding silently in crisp uniforms. Eleanor was coming too, because, of course, she wouldn't miss the chance to remind me where I truly belonged. I spent hours getting ready, choosing a navy dress that flattered but didn't scream for attention. My hair fell in loose waves over my shoulders, my makeup understated. I rehearsed conversations in my head, trying to anticipate her barbed remarks, trying to steel myself. Michael arrived early, giving me a gentle kiss on the cheek, whispering, "Tonight, just breathe, I've got you." His eyes were full of reassurance, but even so, my stomach twisted into nervous knots. When we arrived, Eleanor was already seated, scanning the room as if she were conducting some secret audit. She looked up as we approached, her smile thin and precise. "You made it," she said, voice flat but pointed. The air felt heavier, thick with tension, and I felt my cheeks flush. Michael slid my chair out for me, and I sat, hands clenched in my lap, trying to force my breathing steady. We ordered, the conversation polite but stilted. Eleanor kept glancing at me, her expression unreadable. And then, just as the waiter set down our champagne flutes, Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes glinting with something sharp. She said it, the words I'd been dreading, the ones I'd feared I'd never escape. "You really think you're good enough for him?" The room seemed to hush, the clinking of cutlery fading into the background. Michael looked down at his glass, took a slow breath, and then he stood. My heart stopped. Michael straightened, his hand still resting lightly on the back of my chair, and for the first time that night, the tension in the air shifted. The hum of quiet conversation around us seemed to fade as every eye in the restaurant subtly turned toward our table. Eleanor's smile faltered, the carefully constructed mask slipping just a fraction. "You really think you're good enough for him?" she had said, voice dripping with disdain. I felt my chest tighten, ready to shrink into the seat, but Michael's next words stopped me before I could. "I do," he said, voice calm but firm, carrying through the room with a clarity that made heads turn. "And it's not just me who thinks so." He looked at me then, eyes soft but unwavering, and I felt warmth flood my chest. The doubt I had carried for years, the shadows Eleanor had cast over my confidence, began to crack under the weight of his conviction. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth, perhaps to respond, but Michael raised his hand slightly, halting her mid-sentence. I've spent years watching you try to define yourself through someone else's approval. But Olivia, she doesn't need anyone else's validation to be extraordinary. I do, and I love her for it. My throat tightened. I blinked rapidly, afraid that if I let myself feel too much, I might start crying right there in front of everyone. I had always known Michael was kind, gentle, supportive, but hearing him defend me so publicly, with such courage, was beyond anything I had imagined. The waiter paused mid-step, the soft clatter of silverware echoing like a distant drumbeat. A few nearby tables glanced over, curious, sensing the drama unfolding without needing to hear every word. And Eleanor's face had shifted from arrogance to shock, then to something I didn't recognize, uncertainty. The queen of judgment, momentarily dethroned, her carefully cultivated air of superiority cracking in real time. I think you've been mistaken about her all this time, Michael continued, voice steady. She's smart, she's kind, she works harder than anyone I know, and she loves me with everything she has. So yes, Eleanor, she is more than good enough, not just for me, but for anyone lucky enough to know her. I could hardly breathe. Every word he spoke felt like sunlight breaking through years of storm clouds. All the dinners where I had swallowed insults, all the quiet nights where I had questioned myself, every hurtful glance from Eleanor, it all culminated in this one moment, this public declaration of love and loyalty. Eleanor opened her mouth again. This time, her words caught in her throat. The restaurant had gone silent. The clinking of glasses and soft murmurs paused as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, she did something I never expected. She leaned back, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief, and whispered something under her breath. I couldn't catch it, but the sting of her quiet fury was almost palpable. My hand trembled as I reached for Michael's, grateful beyond words that he had chosen this moment to stand up not just for me, but for the love we shared. And just as relief began to bloom inside me, I felt a sudden, sharp knock on the window beside our table. I turned, heart thumping, and saw a figure standing outside, watching us. My stomach dropped. I froze, my hand still clutched in Michael's. The man, or woman, I couldn't tell from the dim glow of the streetlight outside, was staring straight at us, expression unreadable. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Michael followed my gaze, his brow furrowing as he rose slightly from his seat. "Who?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood fully, moving toward the window with a cautious, protective air. I could feel the tension radiating off him, the same quiet strength that had silenced Eleanor moments ago. The figure outside didn't move, just held their ground, one hand pressed against the glass. Then the figure lifted it, revealing an envelope, plain and white. My stomach lurched. Envelopes at dinner were never good. Michael opened the door just a crack, careful, eyes scanning the shadowed street, and the person handed it over without a word, disappearing into the darkness as silently as they had appeared. I stared at the envelope in Michael's hands, trembling. Something told me this wasn't a simple message. My mind raced. Was it a threat, a warning, or worse, some cruel trick designed to shatter the fragile peace of tonight? I glanced at Eleanor, who had gone deathly still, her earlier smugness replaced with a sharp, wary curiosity. For once, she seemed powerless, watching the scene unfold like the rest of us. Michael broke the seal, and my breath hitched. Inside was a single photograph. I gasped, the image almost knocking the air from my lungs. It was a picture of me and Michael, taken when we thought no one was watching, laughing at the park last week. But that wasn't all. There was a message scrawled in black ink across the bottom. "You're not what he deserves, but I'll make sure he knows." I felt my knees go weak. Every insecurity I had ever felt around Eleanor, every fear that maybe I wasn't enough, came rushing back in a tidal wave of dread. Michael's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the photo, but his eyes never left mine. I could see the same protective fire I had always loved, tempered with a hint of anger I had never witnessed before. "We'll handle this," he said quietly, sliding back into his chair, still holding my hand. His voice was calm, but I could feel the tension radiating like static electricity in the air. Tonight isn't about fear. It's about us. Do you trust me? I nodded, though my chest was still tight, my mind swirling with what-ifs. I realized then how fragile confidence can be. Even when love is strong, the shadows of doubt can creep in from unexpected corners. Eleanor, meanwhile, sat frozen, her gaze darting between us and the photograph. I could see the realization hitting her. No words of judgment, no carefully rehearsed critiques could shake the bond between Michael and me. She had underestimated something far more powerful than her opinions, a love grounded in respect, understanding, and unwavering support. The restaurant resumed its hum of quiet conversation, but for me, everything had changed. The night I had feared, where I imagined humiliation and heartache, had shifted into something charged, unpredictable. Michael's declaration had been just the beginning, and now, with that photograph in our hands, I knew the real test was about to begin. I clutched his hand tighter as my mind raced. Whoever had sent that photo knew something. They knew enough to strike fear into my heart, and for the first time in years, I wondered if Eleanor's disdain was just the surface of a deeper, more dangerous game. I could barely breathe as Michael stood, holding my hand firmly, his eyes scanning the photograph once more. "We're not letting fear dictate tonight," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "This ends now, together." We left the table, walking slowly toward the exit, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Eleanor rose too, her expression unreadable, and for the first time, I noticed a flicker of something like apprehension in her eyes. Outside, the night was crisp, the streetlights casting long shadows on the empty sidewalk. The envelope lay forgotten on our table, but the photograph burned in my mind. Michael didn't hesitate. He scanned the nearby streets, and then he spoke, voice calm but commanding. "If someone thinks they can shake us with threats, they've underestimated who we are." I felt a surge of pride, my earlier fears melting into resolve. For years, I had questioned my worth, let Eleanor's words chip away at my confidence, but now I understood what true support meant. It wasn't just words, it was action, it was protection, it was unwavering belief. A figure emerged from the shadows. Eleanor's gasp told me she recognized them. My heart leapt, not with fear, but with sudden clarity. It was a distant cousin of Michael's, someone who had long envied his success and had never approved of our marriage. The photograph, the note, it had all been their attempt to unsettle me, to test Michael's loyalty, and maybe to humiliate me. But Michael didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his presence magnetic, radiating the same quiet authority I had admired in him for years. "You don't get to decide what's good enough for my wife or for me," he said. "This ends tonight." The cousin faltered, realizing that their plan had failed, and in that instant, I saw Eleanor's face soften, not entirely, but enough to show a hint of grudging respect. She had spent years believing she could control how others perceived me, but Michael's words and actions had made it impossible to undermine what we had built. I felt tears prick my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of fear or doubt. They were relief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of love. Michael reached for me, pulling me close. "You are everything I could ever hope for," he whispered, pressing his forehead against mine. The words Eleanor had used to belittle me now rang hollow against the strength of his declaration. The rest of the night blurred into a kind of quiet triumph. We returned to our table, sat hand in hand, and Eleanor, surprisingly silent, chose to leave without further comment. Michael held my hand across the table, never letting go, and in that moment, I understood something profound. Worth isn't defined by anyone else, not even by those who claim to know better. Worth is built in love, respect, and the courage to stand up for yourself and for each other. Later, as we walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, Michael looked at me with that familiar warmth. Tonight wasn't just about standing up to her, he said gently. It was about reminding us both that we belong to each other first. And in that quiet, unassuming moment, I finally felt it, the truth I had sought for so long. I was good enough, not because anyone else said so, but because the man I loved believed it, fiercely and unapologetically, and that belief was enough to silence a lifetime of doubt.